Okay, so welcome back to session 2 and welcome to those of you who are new, because we did pick up quite a few people between the first session and the start of this one. So if you are new, I really hope you had an opportunity to look at the first session. If not, we'll maybe unpack a little bit about where you should be looking for that and where you would find some resources. But we're going to, in theory, what we were looking at is always planning sort of 2 months at a time. But what I'm hearing sort of across the province with all the boards that I'm working with is that people aren't where they thought they would be at this point. And in some cases, we've had some school boards that have really gotten hit with COVID already. And so they're finding lots of absenteeism is starting to plague the situation as well. So just being aware and having a look even at the chat box, kind of where everyone is right now. You're very much in the place, in some cases actually a little bit further ahead than the rest of the province, and that's a good thing. But I want to be cognizant that there are some ground pieces that we need to have in place and really be strong and well versed in them. Sort of that old motto that we said in June, to go slow in September, a little bit of October, to go faster later. We've got nothing to gain by rushing them through because we have this number of 1,000 that everyone's panicked over. We need to be concrete at 100. And if we can really master those pieces, 200, 300, 500 is not significantly different. But if I can't master the 100 and all the components thereof, then I'm going to run into trouble. And it doesn't matter what number you give me at the end, that's going to be an issue. So I'm going to focus a little bit on that today. I'm also going to focus a little bit on assessment, actually a good portion on assessment, because also in all my travels, hearing lots of content being covered, but shying away from what does that assessment look like. And I want to make sure that regardless of whether you're following the year at a glance, not following the year at a glance, doesn't matter. In the end, in June, we should all have found exactly the same big rocks. We should all have assessed the same big rocks. And I know it's always been an old adage that an 80 at one school isn't always an 80 at another school, and an excellent at one school isn't interpreted the same as another school. And yet it should be if we're all on the same page. So I want to talk a little bit about that because that's one of the things that we've been hearing from school boards, central offices in particular, especially for those of you who are dealing with a new platform. There's so many school boards that have got new platforms this year. Plus you're having to report only on the learner outcome. And I hear things like, well, we use a grading scale of, approaching, meeting, exceeding, blah, blah, blah. But we're only going to report on the outcome. And so my comment to some superintendents has been, so what does that look like? Does that look like every child in your school is not meeting until June? If that's my only way to report, because there is no way in the world that a child is going to meet a 1,000 outcome. So we're hearing things like, we're not going to be giving 3 report cards. We're waiting until January to give our first report card. We're not giving report cards. We're only giving a final at the end of the year. We're only doing anecdotals, but the question still comes up, what does that look like and how do we talk about it with parents? So I want to spend a little bit of time on that notion today, because I think that's something that's kind of needed and people are kind of a little bit concerned about what did that look like in my report card, or at least what I'm going to have as a conversation with parents. For those of you who just joined us, even though I'm talking, you can throw in the chat box a little bit about where you're at right now, just what number you might be working on, if you're working on patterning, if you're doing money, like what have you got going up until now, and just maybe just throw that in the chat box as well. Okay, so let's move on. I'm going to start with our acknowledgement before we just sort of dive into all of our work. So in the spirit of reconciliation, we want to acknowledge that this gathering is taking place on traditional lands across the province of Alberta, home to many diverse Indigenous, Métis, and Inuit peoples. We especially acknowledge Cree, Dene, and Métis who have walked and marked these lands for generations. We acknowledge that this land is a traditional meeting ground, giving voice to its original peoples, and the story of creation of this country in a way that history has forgotten. And we are coming from pretty much all corners of the province, everywhere from up north, furthest west, down south. So you really are a diverse group. And there are a lot in this group. We're just not seeing them today, and that's fine. I totally understand what goes on after schools. So as I mentioned before, what I'd like to do is have a look at sort of the notion of outcomes and concepts so that we are assessing regardless of what order you're doing it in, because remember, there's no right or wrong way. How do we link that to assessment or a statement that we could use with parents? And how do I leverage that if I've got children, which we always do, that are at one end of the spectrum to another? So slow learner to I've got some high flyers, right? So how am I reporting those? Can't wait for the slow ones to get caught up. So how am I dealing with that, especially with the new curriculum? So the journey that we had marked in our sort of our year at a glance was a 20 to 50. And what I'm saying to a number of groups right now is maybe you need to adjust those, and we'll look at that again, to be ranges. And I think most of you are doing that anyway. But that we have a range of numbers that we can target. There's no hard and fast here. We know that our end goal is 1,000, and there's all things that happen with 1,000, but that's sure not happening in September, October, November. So we really want to make sure that we're grounded in that 100 number before we do anything. I want to just look at the website too, both the website where your resources are, but also the new Learn Alberta, because there's been a few changes there. I just want to make sure that everybody is in the know and knows how to find everything that's on there. So you'll be at your computer here in a bit as well. So really the three things, same as before, we really want you to come away from the session, hopefully with some ideas, but also knowing that you have these end goals that seem maybe a bit daunting. And yet if we can just chunk them out in smaller pieces, that they are very manageable, and that you have the tools available to you to make those manageable in incremental chunks. We're not here to cover any one of those outcomes in its entirety, and we're not reporting on any final result until the end of the year. So to that end, I'm not going to go through this whole big document again. This is our numbered outcome document for those of you who are new, and if you've watched the first session, then you know the numbering system. But why I want to go back to this one is because remember, there are three colors. This is our color for math, but regardless of the curriculum you look at, the darkest color is the row on top, which is the organizing idea. And remember that that's houses our overarching big rock. So if you had organizing, essential outcomes, big rocks, whatever you called them before, this is where you're going to find the one that spans all the grades. This is the big concept. And we need to all be able to find that concept in the same statement. It doesn't have to be at the same time. Most of you are working on this one already, but let's say you weren't. At some time when you pick it up, we should all be finding the same big rock. It should be further enhanced when I look down into the grades. So as I look down into the guiding questions, the big rock that sits up here starts to get broken down a little bit. But more specifically, how it actually applies to my kids will be determined by your learner outcome, and that gets unpacked by the CUS. So it's those concepts that I want to spend some time on, because that drives your assessment, or it should drive our assessment. A couple of other things that I want to just remind you of, and I won't do this again in session 3. I've selected a couple of the outcomes that you're working on right now, the 1.5, 1.2. But it's the wording in here I just want to make sure that everybody is on the same page with. So words that can describe a comparison between two unequal quantities include, this is right out of your curriculum document, not equal to, greater than, less than. Okay, just a reminder that when the word include shows up in that big brown document anywhere in any column, it's not always in the same place. Anything that is after the word include must be included in the instruction. So in other words, it's not negotiable to use the words not equal to, greater than, less than. Now, to be honest with you, those bulleted words, in most cases when they're bulleted words, most teachers have said those are the words that I would use anyway. And I totally agree. But it doesn't mean that that's the only thing you have to use. Okay, remember that you are allowed to use additional phrases, if you have other things in your back pocket and best practices that have always worked for you, you're not throwing those away, but you must include these. And if you have other ones that enhance it, use them by all means. I'm going to skip down to the word such as. A graph includes features such as, now most of you haven't started that, but let's just say you had, such as a title, a legend, axes and axes, and labels. Typically, if I was teaching a graph to students, I would have them include all of those. Might even have color in them, right? But those terms are pieces that I would naturally include when I'm teaching students how to graph. However, the word such as suggests that those are not necessarily all the things that you have to do. So if you felt that there are some pieces in there that are not as relevant and you would not teach them, then you have the flexibility in such as not to. If you had a different term that you use for it, again, you have some flexibility. So the such as is a little bit more negotiable for the teacher to decide how they want to approach it. Now, again, I'm going to say to you that in the such as, when they have bulleted terms like this, like I don't know how you could teach graphing without those terms. So less in the bulleted words, but where I do think the such as is a benefit to have a choice is when they give examples. A lot of times, some of their examples, I think, are a little bit more, for the lack of a better descriptor, a big city approach. And for a small town child to get that example may not resonate with them at all. It just might not be at all. So if you read it through and say, oh, I don't think my kids are going to mean, that means nothing to them, don't have to even use it. You can just come up with your own example. Or if you like it and you have another one, you can do both. So you have the flexibility there. The other piece is the words in brackets. So we do have them in grade 2. We are going to do work on that. We haven't started them yet. We kind of parked that one to be one for sort of after Christmas, because that's a good hands-on to bring them back to. But the words that are in brackets are words that we must teach them. They are mathematical terms, and it means that we need to teach them to the grade 2s. However, when I'm doing an activity with them, I might not consistently use the word reflection and rotation and translation. I might use flip slides, right? I might use more user-friendly language. And they're saying when they're in brackets like that, make sure that they know what the word is, but more than not, you're probably going to use user-friendly language with the student, age appropriateness, and you have the flexibility to do that. Okay, the other things I want to quickly, I'm not going to go through all of these again, but I do want to remind us that we do need to still put competency, literacy, and numeracy progressions into our teaching. There are 8 competencies, every child, every teacher, every year. So I need to have all 8 competencies show up in my classroom at some point in time. Generally, they're saying every subject. So a child sees how the 8 fit into math. They see how it fits into science. And the same terminology is going to come up, so they're going to get to learn them very quickly. But the intent was, remember that in 2013, when they came out, that when I graduate in 2030, I'm fully versed, I'm able to apply for jobs, I know my strengths and weaknesses in terms of competencies. And I can tell you right now, we don't even have to wait till 2030. We are already there. You cannot apply for a job that isn't competency based. So if you go to an interview right now and they say, can you give me an example of when you use critical thinking and it was very successful? And you kind of look at them and say, could you elaborate on that? That's a pretty good indicator to them that you don't know what critical thinking is, or you haven't reflected on what your strengths are. So that's where the world was intent to go for 2030. But like I said, we're already there. These competencies, the literacy and numeracy progressions, have already been linked to your outcomes. So I just want to go there, first of all, just to make sure that everybody knows where to find them, because you don't have to reinvent the wheel here, and you don't have to think about, which one should I use? Like, I have no idea which ones even fit this. So I'm on the new Learn Alberta site right now. You have that slide deck at the end of the day, so you can always go back to that and you can always click it on. But if you just want to follow along, or if you want to bring up your Learn Alberta at the same time, feel free to do that. I'm not going to log in right now. I want to be Joe Blow off the street, mom, dad, kid. Anybody is me right now. I can go in and this is what I would see. So I'm going to go into the curriculum side because that's where I really want to spend my minute here. And just a quick reminder, again, we did this in the first session, but 2 places for curriculum. The one that you come to right off the bat is at the top, and that lets me sort of focus on my grade. But if I want that big brown document, the one that has K to 6 in it, then I want to go down here to printable curriculum. All right, we're going to stay at the top for now. I'm going to choose math. I'm going to go to grade 2. And the very first thing that will come up is, and depending on the size of the screen that you are looking at right now, you might see just grade 2. You might see grade 2 and 3, or if you have a big screen, 2, 3, and 4. It adjusts according to the size of your screen. I'm just going to leave my 2 grades on because I do like to see where I'm going further down. So what will come up is your grade, the very first organizing idea. That's not the one I work with, and just keep scrolling down, but we're going to park ourselves here right now. The guiding question, and here's our first learner outcome. It says students analyze quantities to 1,000. We have lots of rows of cusps that go with that. But what I want you to watch is when I was up here at the organizing idea and I went down through the guiding question, when I came to my learner outcome, it turned green. And that turning green says there's a bunch of attachments already completed on that one outcome, not every outcome in grade 2. Now we're just talking about students analyze quantities to 1,000, ignoring everything else that's in your curriculum. So if I go to the I that has the circle for information, it now screens everything else that we had on the page off, and I'm just focused on the first outcome. So it's saying you clicked it on for this, so that's all we're going to talk about. But also below that, you'll notice that all of these different menus came up, attaching itself only to this curriculum. So let's say I wanted to know what competencies of the 8 does somebody see as being related to this quantities to 1,000. So if you scroll down below it, you'll see critical thinking, problem solving, research management, creativity and innovation, communication. You might go, whoa, like holy, I'm not going to do all those. And the answer is good, because you're not expected to do all of them. You're only expected to do one. And I always say, just do one competency well in an activity that you're doing. You can't do all 5 that are listed here. You can't even do 2. Kids have to learn them. They have to understand what it means. They have to learn about themselves. So pick one that fits with some of the activities that you're doing. And it doesn't have, it could be 2. I mean, some people may say, well, I got 2 that really fit. Well, then that's fine, do 2. But really, you're only looking to see what one fits with the kind of activities, the working that they're going to be doing. Maybe I have a PBA for them, or they're doing a game or an activity or something that they have to do some thought process in. How is that going to be reflected in a competency? So again, you're picking and choosing. You'll all be working on the same outcome, but depending on the activity that you choose, even if you plan with a grade partner, you might each look at that outcome differently and see an activity that you would like to do with them, which means you might choose a different competency. And that's absolutely fine. Nothing wrong with that. We don't grade the competencies. There is a rubric that should have been passed on in CUME files, just indicating from grade to grade, year to year, how the student is progressing over time, but there is no mark attached to these. The literacy and numeracy progressions, I'll just do one. I'm not going to do them all. Literacy progressions, if I wanted to know what literacy progressions are generally attached to this outcome, which means there's some writing involved, what might it be? Awareness, rules of language, construct meaning, communicate meaning. Okay, again, I'm not going to do everything depending on the activities that you're having me do, but that gives you a sense that that work has already been done for you. You don't have to reinvent the wheel and try and rack your brain as to figuring out, you know, I'm not sure which one I would choose. If you have never thought about how I might do those, the flip of that would be true too. I could click on the competencies again. I could look at all the competencies that they've listed. If I've never actually even thought about sort of a bigger assignment for them, then I might look at this and say, oh yeah, you know, I got some stuff here that they could probably do some research on that would tie really well into this. Or there's a problem solving set of questions that I have. You can get ideas about maybe where you do want to take them into. So just do it in reverse as opposed to having the question and finding where it goes. Let's go to resources. I just want to reiterate that resources that are listed for this outcome are suggestive in nature only. So nothing that is on this site is required. It is only suggestive. If you're going to use some of the jump math ones, you have to look at the lesson itself and make sure that it matches your outcome, because a lot of them are listed in here, have a word or two in them that relate to your outcome, but they may not actually match it exactly. So just be discerning when you go and grab it and have a look at it so that you know that, yeah, it's a good match. Now remember, I'm Joe Below off the street. So you'll notice that they're locked. I can read about it, I can look at it, but I cannot access the teacher stuff. That can only be done by you once you've logged in and you have all the sign-in abilities. Another piece is Gizmos. Okay, the Gizmos are an interactive. If you haven't worked with Gizmos before in the past, they're an interactive platform. So instead of me doing a paper and pencil kind of activity with the kids, this would replace that. It is a lesson. It's very interactive. Kids love them. But it definitely gets to the outcomes that we want to measure. Again, when you look at the Gizmos, you must make sure that they actually fit the lesson that you want it to fit. So on the note of Gizmos, I just want to bring up two things. We've been having a lot of people ask us about coding. Like, I don't know anything about coding. I don't even know what to do with coding. We have kindergarten teachers that already got the kids flying on coding, and we have some who are saying, I have no idea what to do with this, and all the way up the ladder. So in K1-2, you could do coding with paper and pencil. It's maybe not as active for the kids, but absolutely you can still do it. However, that being said, we as in my science partner and I, have approached Gizmo Learning from two fronts. One of them is because we're the only two unpacking science in the province. We are trying to link as many resources as we can. Gizmos has lots of science resources. It's not just what you see here in the math. And so we asked ExploreNet Learning, who are the ones who own this, and they're the ones who are sharing the license with Alberta Ed, if they would be willing to put a number of sessions together for free for teachers to attend, to get a login and a password and navigate their site. So you would see all the math ones, but you would see anything else that they have to offer. And so they've agreed to doing that. So it actually started today. If you haven't already seen it on the CARC website, you can go in. There's several different days available after school. But the one that we were targeting was on October 26th for math and science teachers in the province. It is just for that group. If you want to learn how to code, don't know anything about it, never done it before, have no idea, you can come, we will set it up for you. They will take you through right from step one. And it is a night for the teacher. It's not a night for you to worry about how fast can I do this because I have to take it back to class next day. It is just for you, the teacher. If you know how to code and you want to go at a higher level, they will set you up with that as well. But really, it's a night for you to come and just learn. However, they're not going to be handing out passwords and taking you through the site that night. We're going to use direct work from ExploreNet Learning. So that means you have to have signed up. If you haven't already done that, and some of you already have, so that's fine. But you need to get your login and your password. So check those out and then keep October 26th if that's something of interest to you in the back pocket as well. Now remember, all these would turn green once I log in as a teacher. And if you're not seeing green when you're logged in as a teacher, then you haven't got the full level of everything that you should have. The other thing that changed 2 weeks ago is that Alberta Education purchased the rights to Mathology books. So now everybody's got them for free. You can't print the book per se. I mean, there are some that I found that you can download, but the intent was for you to read them on the smartboard. You still have the teacher manual, all the resources to make the lessons and whatever. So you have access now to some really neat little books that will fit well into your topics and outcomes that you're teaching. With the Mathology books that are linked to First Nations, we are currently in the process of writing lesson plans for you for those. We're going to write the lesson plan, not just give you a reference. So those are being done as we speak, and hopefully will be done shortly and ready for you guys to access. They will be bookmarked by the outcome number in the numbered outcomes. So if it's a 2N 1.1 that it fits to, that's what we're going to link it to. So that's how you can find the link to the book. Are there any questions about the Learn Alberta site? Just unmute yourself, you guys. Don't worry about chat boxes. Just throw it in and ask away. If you don't see all those different pieces, there's a little box in the right-hand corner on Learn Alberta that says Contact Us. If you click that on, they usually get back to you within the same day. Just tell them, just write in the chat box what I need. I don't see this, or I don't see boards. If you are signed in and you think you're signed in and you don't see boards in your menu list on the left-hand side, then you still haven't got the full sign-in ability. So we want to make sure that that gets done. Okay, let's move on. So I want to talk a little bit about concepts so that we all assess at the same place. And then this would give you a chance now to maybe think about what kind of documentation have you already got, and it might actually match all of this, and this is not the end all be all. This is one way to do it. But I want to make sure that we do get assessment done, not just content teaching. So a concept will be found in the organizing idea, and that concept that you find there would be the big rock. That's the one that spans several grades. And I should be able to find that one or several. Some of them have several in that particular statement. It will have attributes. It will cross multiple different versions of the grades. But in the end, that is kind of the big umbrella that you're opening up. And you think of the grade in that umbrella as a rung on the umbrella. So the point is that big overarching concept. So it's been a while since we think about concepts. I just want to make sure that everybody's looking at it in the same way. So a chair is a concept. If you've forgotten maybe how to find a concept, here's a cheating way. Look for a noun. Look for the noun that sits in your sentences or your statements. The noun should be something that is broad, right? It should be able to go anywhere at any time. So for example, if I use the example of chair is a concept. So if I had a chair 100 years ago, I'm probably going to have a chair 100 years from now, right? It's timeless. There's no framework that says beginning and end to a chair. It might look different in 100 years from now. It might have looked different 100 years from now, but the fact is we still have a chair and it still basically serves the same purpose. It is universal. You can go anywhere in the world right now, and you may not speak the language of the country you're in, but if you figured out what the word was, everybody knows what a chair is in their language. It doesn't require an explanation in a dictionary to figure out what that is. So that's kind of the definition that we use when we're looking for the concept, the big rock that you're trying to find. It's always one word, maybe two, never a phrase, definitely not a sentence. So if you've got a whole string of things together, you need to go back and revisit what you're thinking is the concept. Usually it's a word, maybe, like I said, maybe one or two words. So let's kind of link this notion of chair to our curriculum. If I were to say to you, let's go over to Leon's or the Brick right now. When you walk through the front doors, you walk into a furniture store, you see a variety of different furnitures. You'll see couches and beds and chairs and tables and lamps. Like you see all kinds of stuff in there. But you were going for a chair. That was the purpose of your visit. But even the chair is still pretty vague. And our guiding question that would kind of sit over here is open. It asks you as the teacher to think about how are you going to answer that, because that how you answer it is how you're going to engage the kids to learn that learner outcome. So I need to know a little bit more about my chair, specifically what kind of chair am I looking for? So if I named it as a dining room chair, I can now go past all the furniture that's in that building. I can zero in on the dining room section. I can ignore the tables and I can look at dining room chairs. And that is the same as our learner outcome. It zeroes down to what was the big rock, but how did that big rock get unpacked for my kids in grade 2, specifically will be at the learner outcome level. And all the cusps that come below that will really unpack it. That's how I'm going to break it down. So remember when I said the lens, that the way you see something, the way you have an activity, the way you are going to put something together for the kids to do will also determine how you're going to go about assessing them and what it is you're going to assess. More the what than the how at that point. So the lens that we wear, the glasses we look through, will really determine the direction you want to take. If you look at the 9 boxes that are on the screen right now, and I say to you, look at them through the lens of quantity. The minute I say quantity, I will guess that most of you will start to look at what's behind the equal sign. And we kind of see that it goes from a question mark to 15, kind of a range, right? That's quantity. But if I say, take those glasses off now and look at this through the lens of representation, I don't really care what the quantity is anymore. I don't even care what the numbers are. I'm looking more at how are the students using a strategy to come up with an addition. So that's the representation that they are using to come up with an addition question or to solve an addition question. The lens we use will determine what we zero in on and what it is we're expecting the students to be able to model to us or show us and what we're going to assess them on. So here's one of your learner outcomes. It's your very first one, same one that we looked at. Okay, so learner outcome. We've done away from we're on the 3rd line now of your colors. So students analyze quantities to 1,000. And we said kind of at the beginning, we're just focusing on sort of a range of 20 to 50, right? That was kind of our goal to start with. So if I was to look for the concepts that sit in just that sentence, student is a concept, it's a noun, even though it's plural here. Quantity is the big rock. There's where I'm hanging my hat. There is my big rock in my learner outcome. How I'm unpacking quantity, it is probably, if you looked up at your organizing idea, you'll see the word up there, and you will. You'll see it up there as well. So I should see some consistency in wording and lots of relationships to that word. What I want you to do right now is just look through knowledge, understanding, skills, and procedures. And just, you're not going to have to put these in the chat box, just on a piece of paper or whatever you have handy. Just jot down the content concepts that you're seeing in the statements that are there, regardless of the column. Just run through the columns quickly and jot down the content concepts that you're seeing. Quantity is a content concept. Okay, so I'll give you a minute just to do that. Now, in the interest of time, I'm going to get going. So you may have just gotten started, and that's okay. But what I want to just make sure is that you have the right start, okay, that you're finding at least some of them. So here they are, highlighted in yellow. They're all nouns. They all, if you go through them, number, value, placeholder, number line, quantity, place number, values, number, hundreds, tens, thousands, digit, number. I see the same things over and over. They're all linked to quantity. If you start seeing things that are completely unrelated to maybe what you thought was the concept up top, you might want to revisit either the wording up here or have a look again what you've highlighted here. Remember, it's a noun. Noun's the easiest way to remember. It's not always, but I would say 99% of the time, that's a good way to do it. Okay, so that's the content concepts. That's what you're assessing. You are assessing those words that are highlighted, their ability to handle those words in the context of the cusp. So by that, I mean, there's another set of concepts in these 3 columns, and that are the skill concepts. So what are the skill concepts that are left that we haven't highlighted in these 3 columns? So just quickly glance through them. There aren't as many for sure, but just find the skill concepts in order to identify what the kids have to do. So we see the word represent in various different forms, but definitely there. Identify, relate, associated. Associated is kind of a one-off right now. I could have also highlighted analyze at the top here. These are all concepts of skill. And to remember at the very, very beginning when we started this whole thing, we said, do not fall in the trap of turning this into a checklist where you go check, check, check on this side, check, check, check on this side. I must be done the middle. The answer was these had to be the content and the content and the skills had to be married together when I do the assessment. So that being said, I went through and I went up to November. I actually have one up to December for you as well. We're going to revisit again. We meet again at the end of November. So that's when I'm going to really unpack December even more. I think right now we just need to get caught up. There's some concern about being a little bit behind. So I went through all of your September, October, November year at a glance. Okay, so that's the common piece that we said we would start with. But again, you don't have to follow that. So using our year at a glance, I went through and I looked at what are all the words of skill concept that I have to cover with the students. And behind it, you see the sentence that appears directly related to it for content from your curriculum document. So these aren't something that I made up. They come right out of your curriculum document. So either it was in the knowledge, it was in the understanding, or it was in the skills and procedures. Okay, it was in one of those columns. Is it the only word model that I see that has to do with odd and even? No, you'll see model come up in a number of occasions. I just gave you one example for now. But if this is what I have to show and have to assess, I need to assess a student's ability not just to know the content of odd and even quantities, but are they able to model how they know it's an odd and even quantity, right? So those have to get married together. If I don't know odd and even, I'm going to have a tough time modeling it, but maybe modeling will help me to determine what's odd and even if I give me some strategies and I teach them how to do that. The other piece that I want you to remember is that those words in bold were not there for you, the teacher, only. They are there for the student as well. We have to teach a student what model is. Like we actually have to bring up the word model and teach them what model is so that they have a clue when you say, can you model odd and even for me, what it is we're asking them for. So right from kindergarten on, they are working on these words to start off to teach students what they mean. And of course, I'm going to have to revisit these. Every time it comes up, I might want to have to review what model means, ask them that. But surely by sort of end of February, beginning of March, the word model, relate, represent, whatever, they're starting to hear those so many times with you already that they already know what you want from them. They get it. And how do they get it? Because you're always revisiting for mastery. If my goal is 20 to 50, that's a long ways from 1,000. So I have a long way to go. So that means I'm going to be revisiting these outcomes more than once, which means I'm revisiting both the concept of skill and the content concepts. I'm just bumping up what it is you're working on every time. So when we brought these forward, first of all, one of the things that we decided was there are options here that if you're looking for a way to assess, differentiate, and sort of keep a running record of where students are at, I could take any one of these. And primary teachers, not to insult you because you guys do this, as far as I'm concerned, better than anybody else. You already do this. But I can take any one of these statements and I can flip it to just say, so-and-so is able to model odd and even quantities too. So if I have some low kids right now in grade 2 that are just working on 10, but I have some that are already working at 25, but I have some that are working at 50, I can simply put a number in there and I can show growth over time, but I'm also watching to see how they're progressing. Would I do a sentence for every one of these? I guess you could. Could you model and put some of these together? Absolutely, you could, for sure. Or you could even have a range, you know, to say that a student is in a range of 20 to 50. Your child is able to model odd and even numbers in a range of, and just have ranges, and that lets you put more students into the same one. But really, we keep revisiting because we're moving towards 1,000, which we've never had to do before. But we're mastery at 100. Get the mastery to 100 solid with the kids. because then moving forward to 200 and 300 is not going to be as big a heap that we need to get to. So these have been done for you, and I can share these with you. They're in a slide deck, but I can share a written copy with you as well if it's something that you would like. We've had a number of school groups already take these and just get together in a PLC group, and they just reworded them that worked for them. And that's fine. I'm not suggesting these are the end all be all, but what I am saying is that you cannot assume that a child knows what skip counting is. You cannot assume that a child knows what determine means. What exactly are you looking for in determine? So to that end, because we've had some teachers saying, well, I'm not sure that I know exactly so that I'm consistent with everybody else. So we are taking this as a group that are working with me right now of math teachers. We are pulling these out for you, and we're going to create a miniature little booklet for you. They will be in alphabetical order, but we will take them and give you a definition of what does it mean to model? What would we look for? And we'll give an example underneath, and we'll show you where they might show up in your grade curriculum as well, just so that there's some continuity for you. And we'll just share it. I mean, you don't have to use it. If it would be helpful to you, great. If not, just ignore it. But we'll have it available to you, hopefully in short order, because we're working on it right now. And we're actually going to put science into it as well, because pretty hard to not have these terms linked to the science at the same time. So we might as well throw them in there. Not everybody's piloting science, and that's fine. But to have numbers like describe and demonstrate and identify that show up in science, then we should be consistent in how we're going to approach that, even in the current one. So this would be a way for me to keep anecdotal records at any level. It doesn't matter. Now, some teachers have said, I'm going to use those statements. I love them. I'm going to do that. But I'm going to put a qualifier at the end saying your child is able to do quantities up to 20, odd and even, while we are working at 50, right? So there's the indicator to a parent, if that's the kind of report that you want to use, that not quite where everybody else is right now. Our goal is at 50 and we're still at 20. So it just gives them a bit of a sense, but it just lets you keep revisiting over and over and over again the assessment piece. So by the time I get to 150, my goodness, we've done this so many times already to get to 100. I already know what you want. And when I say about teaching these, may I suggest that you teach it outside of the math first. Just like I revisited concepts with you by talking about a chair is not math. A chair is a chair, and it's a term that all of you could relate to very easily. If I had started with a math concept that maybe somebody wasn't comfortable with or didn't like, then the connection is I'm worried more about the math, less about trying to understand what the word is. So if I can teach the child the word outside of math first, so identify, for example, let's do that one. Let's everybody take out our lunch kits and put them on the table. Let's see if we can identify some healthy foods that are in our lunches today. So what does that mean when we say we're going to identify healthy foods? What would we be looking for, boys and girls, right? So we're teaching them what the word means outside and something that they can relate to that's in the classroom they've done 100 times, makes sense to them. So when I start bringing the math into it, I'm not trying to learn identify at the same time that you're trying to teach me the math all at the same time. So it does make it a little bit easier. And then I can be very careful that when I'm assessing, I'm assessing them ability to identify odd and even numbers, that I can assess both of those. If all you want me to do is to show you odd and even numbers, but not identify methods to get them or strategies to show you how I got it, that's a different question. All I'm doing is odd and even then. I could show them numbers and say, call it out, odd or even. If I'm asking you to identify, show me a strategy to get there, well, then that's different. Okay, so again, this is just something that we brought forward because people were saying, I'm just teaching. All I'm doing is just trying to get through. I'm trying to get them to this number, trying to get them to this number. But we're saying, don't forget the records along the way that we need. So again, remember the numbers in our year at a glance were just suggestions. So if you want to change this to a range, feel free. Anybody can change these. Our goal is, and I think the 100 was meant to be here as well, but again, I might even say that because of, I kind of know where everybody's at right now in the province, it's not unreasonable to say 50 to 100 here. You can still have a range. We are not going to get mastery in the first 2 months of school or 3 months of school. That's not going to happen. Our goal is to work towards this. but we're not going to be there quickly. I'm also going to strongly suggest that we have this in November listed, that let's park the fractions, any kind of fraction conversation, until maybe that meeting that we have in November. And then we could unpack place value and fractions at the same time using money. So money will be our driver for both the fractions and the place value that we're going to be talking about. Again, time is something that you said would happen all year. You're talking about duration of time, elapsed time. You have a reference in grade 2 about winter count. That was a duration over time, what happens in a winter count. So we'll address that as well. But again, you can start tying some of these together. This isn't meant to be a lesson every day that we're doing time. You're doing it in carpet time when you do your calendar time. You're already doing that. So it's just being intentional about how much we're making the kids aware. So the assessment piece is, what does it sound like and look like in your classroom right now for you to say they have met both the concept of content and the concept of skill? And it doesn't have to be at the same time. You can assess them differently, but generally we want them to be packaged together because that's what the understanding is talking about. Now remember, I just want to go back to this page as well. When you're looking at your year at a glance, the bullets that are in here are your understandings, right? That's the understanding, that's that one understanding that determined a row. So this is your first row of understandings that came with the first outcome of time. If you want to know specifically what goes with that understanding, we still have to look at this document. We still have to unpack what is the knowledge piece I have to do, what is the skills and procedures that are married together to do these two. And remember, you're not doing all the knowledge, and you definitely do not have to do it in the order that it appears. If it does not make sense to talk about place value yet because I don't even know the money yet, then why would we even talk about place value? I need to learn money. I need to be so good at money because I can't even talk about financial literacy if I don't understand money. So I need to get proficient at money in as many different ways as I can, use it as a tool. It doesn't have to be a concept you're teaching all the time. Use it as a tool until I'm really good at money. I see it all the time because you keep bringing it out for patterns. You keep bringing it out for addition. You keep bringing it out so I learn the names of it and the values of it so that I can use it for skip counting, right? I need to practice skip counting by twos, use the toonies once they know what they are, etc. So as much as we can build on them, the better we are. So that's what you'll find in here is simply the breakdown of each of your values. And I may not be ready for this. And maybe I can only skip count by 25-cent pieces to 50 cents. Okay, well, that's better than not at all. So 25, 50, stop. Whereas Ashton, she can go all the way to 100, 25, 50, 75, 100. Great. And if she doesn't, that's fine. I was in grade 2 last week, 3 grade 2 classes actually, and it was the very first day that they had seen money because we had gone through this and the teachers are saying, you know, we need to backtrack. Like we actually started doing all this and we actually didn't even include the money into it. So we went back and basically we just started working with what does the money look like? What is the name of it? We skip counted and we counted by ones and we skip counted by twos. We even counted right up to 10s and not all their kids were at 10 yet, but we can still do that. They don't have to be 100% efficiency for us to still use them as a tool. The more I see it as a kid, the more I am likely to learn what it is you want me to do with them. And then we leverage money for everything that we can. Okay, so when we talk about this one in particular, students investigate addition and subtraction within 100, I'm not doing 100. Maybe I'm doing 10. Maybe I do pennies. Maybe that's all I'm going to do is just use pennies as a counter. Maybe as I did with the grade 2 class there, not everybody knew their coins. So I said, can you find me 5 of the same thing? So then I didn't care what they picked, 5 of the same thing. What have I learned? I learned that they can identify that what looks the same in coins. I learned that some of them said, I'm going to take 5 nickels, and others said, well, which one is the nickel? How do you know which? And so clearly not everybody knows it. That's fine. Find me 5. And what else do I know? That all of them could find 5 of something. So then we said, can you find 10 of the same thing? So sometimes they had to count, say, I don't have 10 of those. Well, then try something else. So again, it tells you a lot of information. I don't have to just memorize money before I start knocking off and revisiting these outcomes over and over and over again without them even knowing it. So again, if they aren't familiar with the money yet, just hold off on the fraction parts, because we'll use money to leverage the understanding of a unit fraction. Remember, in grade 2, they're not talking about fractions. They talk about halves and quarters, the word. They're not talking about 1/2. They're not talking about 1/4. Therefore, that isn't even in the game plan yet. So leave all that out. Talk about just the words. Half a sandwich, half a watermelon, okay, quarter of a cup, pie, or whatever. Like, just using the words, right? And visual images that go along with that. In terms of money, what is half of a dime? I have to know money before I can even answer that question. I need to know that for grade 2. I need to get that going. So just playing and asking questions all the time. And every time they have money in front of them, leverage it for skip counting. Let's count together. And if they fall off the rails and you don't hear anybody counting with you anymore, we'll watch where you stopped, right? Just keep going over it and over it and over it. Again, we're looking at the different perceptions of space, where I can talk the different sides. I can look at shapes. Some kids notice that the loonie has some straight sides on it. Again, we're just looking at shapes. We're not looking for the world's end, because we're going to get deep into that once they know even more, right? We're not hanging our head at those places. So again, you have all of these different, I'm not going to go through each one of them, but again, you can't talk about financial literacy. I can't even talk about a savings and a piggy bank, because A, not everybody gets a piggy bank. B, not everybody's seen money before. So how do I know what I'm saving or what that even means? So I need to have a sense of what that looks like. And we have to be aware that when we talk about wants and needs and savings and earnings, this is all out of your grade 2 curriculum. You're assuming that I would have access to understanding what the money is. There are going to be homes where our children come from, there is no money in the home. So if there is no money in the home, they're disadvantaged already, because they are not going to see any kind of savings or anything like that. So you might want to think about setting up a classroom economy, right? Where you have a little paper bag or a little glass jar for each child. And all those little jobs that you have the grade 2s do on a weekly basis, and they get to move around and they get to switch off, and who's doing this for the office and who's running this for you and who collects the papers, and they each get a job, and that job gets a paycheck. And not every paycheck has to be the same. And on Fridays, the paycheck could be that they get the money in plastic play money into their jar or bag. And when you run out, then we wrote a check for them. So we give them a check saying, we need the money because the bank is low and we haven't got enough to do activities. We're going to give you a check. So now they have to count out what's in their bank. They verify it with you. You write them a check. Now they learn a little bit about a check. So there's so many ways that we can introduce money and just make it part of the fluid math, whether it's the concept of money or a tool that they're just counting with. Just bring it on as much as you can, and kind of think about who's in your class and who might be in a situation where they wouldn't be able to answer a question about money because they just haven't seen it. Remember too that the money app that we shared with you before, I will bring it up. I'll put it in the chat box in case there are some of you who haven't got it. So just grab it from there and just bring it up onto your computer. So what should they be able to identify in terms of money? So in grade 2, in the perfect world, had they come to you having already done the kindergarten and grade 1 curriculum, they would already know all of the coins, all of the attributes of that coin. In grade 1, they would know the value of the coin. They're working on 100 to that coin already in grade 1. And so they would come to you completely proficient in the coins, the values of them. They've already used them for skip counting by 2s, 5s, and 10s in grade 1. So are we there yet in grade 2? Nope. So do we want to leverage that money for that? Absolutely. That way I can use it as a counter. I can use it to teach them the money. And every time I bring it out, I'm going to say to them, let's count. We know that a 2-knee is a 2. Let's get count by 2s. right? And then when they're ready, we can talk about nickels. And if they know that a nickel is 5, doesn't mean that they have to understand cents yet. They should, but they won't. Just skip count by 5s. Just put your finger on, put them however many you put, show me 6 of them. Show me 6 nickels. I'm testing that you know a nickel, that you can count to 6. Put them in a row. Put your finger on the first one. That's what I do with the grade 2s. Let's skip count together. Let's go. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. And then I always do it backwards. Let's go backwards. Okay, that's a stumbling block, but there are kids that were with me. 30, 25, 20, and so on. So every time you bring money out, bring it on. Like, just keep revisiting them. Remember, this one allows you to get some authentic looking money, but it also lets you drag out. If you just say to them, bring it up on your screen, everybody drag me out 4 toonies. What am I checking for? 4. What am I checking for? Toonies. They know which one that is, right? Can you drag out 5 pennies? So I need to know what the pennies are, and they can drag them out one at a time. Once you start to get them going and you want to do them in groups, you want to do skip counting by more. Down in the bottom, remember, you can change the num that you grab out. So if I want 2 of everything, 2 quarters at a time, I can bring them out. So now I can worry about quarters, but I can deal with just skip counting by 2s. So I see 2, 4, 6. So 2, 4, 6. Right now I have 6. I don't have to tell them what the value is. They don't have to be able to go 25 plus 25 there. It may or not even come for a long time. But eventually I want to use these to skip count by 25s because that's in your curriculum. If I want to skip count by 20s, I've got $20 bills that I can do that with. If I have to skip count by 50s, I've got $50 bills that I can do that with. If I'm going to skip count by 100, which is not in your curriculum, but now once I get to 100 and I've mastered it, I can go 100 plus 200. I can count them out, 300, 400. So there's a way for us to start engaging them into 1,000. And they may only get to 300 to start with. That's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect. You can go up to 10 with these. Okay, so there's lots of possibilities. You can change the background of the screen to white. I use this to make all my PowerPoints. So when you change it to white, you can just screenshot whatever you want. You could put them on a slide deck and just say, what do I see? You know, those types of things. All the games that are in the very first session, you have all those money games that are in there. We'll look at those again, but you have them in there. So if they still don't know their money, that's what we want to do. So this is kind of answers that question about here's what they do in kindergarten. They know all of the money. They have to be able to find all of the values of it and then all of the attributes of it. And then here's what they do in grade 1. So this takes us sort of beyond all of those pieces, right? I'm including for you, because exactly of that question, what do they do in kindergarten? Anything that's highlighted in yellow is an outcome in kindergarten that could be done with money. So this is what they're focusing on. They're doing all of these at the same time to get them to learn money, but to do comparisons. Which one's bigger? Which one's smaller? Which one has a different color? Which one, if they know the amount of them, which one is worth more, and so on. Same thing for grade 1. These are all the outcomes for grade 1 that could be covered by money right off the bat. So we just keep revisiting. I'm not going to get to 20. I'm not going to get to all the numbers right away. I just keep going back over it and over it, adding more coins in, adding higher numbers so that when I report to see what you consistently can do, I see that. And here's what I see in grade 2. So remember that I need to probably review this from grade 1 because they haven't done it, and that lets me count coins. Can they go to 20? Can they show you 25? Whatever you want them to show you. And then I can start doing the worrying about skip counting once I know the values of them. So remember, just taking the money out of a bag and dumping it on the table. That's all we did with the grade 2s. Dump it on the table, and my instructions are very simple. Clean it up so it's easier to see. I do not use a math term. I did not say sort it. I did not say group them. I did not say anything. I just said clean it up. Because what you want to know is who knows what, who's putting what together. And as you walk around, I just ask questions. Why did you put these together? Because they're all gold. Okay, do you know what they're called? Nope. Why'd you put these together? Because they're all toonies. How do you know they're toonies? Well, I know they're toonies because I know that's what they're called and I know that they're $2. Okay, clearly that child's got it, right? So I learned a ton about what kids do. Coin may be a word you have to teach them because that is a very foreign word to children. They don't all know what a coin is. So that might be something you have to hold up. I hold up a $20 bill and I say, this is $20 bill. It's paper. What is this? I usually hold up a toonie. They say it's a toonie. And some children will say it's a coin. And I ask them, what is a coin? So it's not a word that they're familiar with. But again, so you have all kinds of opportunities in here. These are the slide decks that we suggested. Down here is that resource link. It's a $3.50 teacher pay teacher, but you only need really one for each grade 1, 2, 3 teacher, because the grade 1 kindergarten teachers only do the attributes. Grade 1, 2 will do the values of them. And then in grade 2, you go a little bit further. So you're going to go beyond just looking at the coins and what they're worth. You're actually going to try and make sure that they match. This is also grade 1, that they can match the coin to the name of it. But can they also put them in order from largest to smallest of value? Like, that's a grade 2. We'd expect that. Actually, grade 1, end of grade 1 probably will be able to do it. Less than, greater than, that's in your curriculum too. Once I know coins really well, I can leverage that for which symbol would you put in here? Is it $2 less than or greater than the loonie? Like, is the toonie loonie? So again, you're just using that to leverage your math outcomes. Same with the money. Money's a little bit easier. Okay, you've got that one already. You could do something like this, drag out pennies. If they are subitizing, and don't forget to subitize, just anything subitize, they should be able to see that this is 5, right? In grade 2, they should see that's 5. If they don't, we start with 5, right? And then we can count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, I see 5. Okay, now I see a group of 10. I see a 10 frame. Whenever I see a 10 frame, what do? I count to 10 with them. I have them put their fingers on. What else do? I go 5, 10. Oh, we just skip counted by 5s. Oh, let's skip count by 2s. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. And I say, can you find groups? Yeah, there's 2 groups of 2, that makes 4. There's 3 groups of 2, that makes 6. That's almost like a lead in to arrays for multiplication, but it's not. It just is a visual of groups of 2s. So I can start getting them beyond just the basic of a 10. Each time they do another one, I see 5s. Okay, well, let's count 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. What else do you see? Well, I see 5 this way. Okay. What else do you see? Well, I see 2 groups of 10. All right, so there's 5, there's 5. 5 and 5 is 10. What's another 5? 15. It's mental addition. Every one of these arrays, that's how quickly I do them with the kids. And we did that the very first day. And do I have some of them with me? Yes. Did I lose some? Yes, we did. But for the teacher that was walking around, she just looked at me and she said, whoa, I had no idea. Who knew what? I do now. She said, now we're going to go. So I'm just going to keep revisiting with them, and we're just going to keep moving forward. But this is the power of money. It's not like you just have to learn the penny first. Just use it as a counter if they don't know it. Keep going with your outcomes, but they have to learn the money at the same time. Every one of these could be a 10 frame, could be 2 dimes and a nickel. I could make it a quarter. This is the ultimate. This is your 100 pennies. There's your 100. So when they get to 100, what do we see? I see groups of 10. I can skip count by 10. I could skip count by groups of 5. I can skip count by 2s. I mean, there's a lot of numbering that I can do here to practice. But this is the frame that eventually we will work towards in November for the unit fractions. This is where we're going to get to. But we're not going to tell them it's fractions. We're just going to build on it to make unit fractions so that they start to understand what a fraction is without using the word. So they have to know their money. Just bring it on. Again, I need to know the money anyway for financial literacy. So we're not doing anything different. Grab a hundreds line, change it to cents. Tell them to put the nickels on, put the dimes on, put the quarters on. Like, where would they go? That's a good skip counting right there, right? There's all kinds of different ways. Okay, I'm cognizant that we're running out of time, so I just want to make sure that you see what's on here very quickly. So this is for those of you who are familiar with the kits that were made. You don't have to make a kit, but if you're wondering how much money could maybe be in a grade 2 Ziploc bag, this would work for starters. They're going to run out depending on what you ask them to do, but it's a good one to start, especially for skip counting of the numbers that they have to do. We also in the kit created a number line that goes to 1,000. So this is a way for them to see 1,000. Down the road, I might say, Ashton, I'm going to give you the number 126. Maria's going to get 224. Here's a close peg. I want you to go put it on that number line. And you're checking to see whether they know benchmarks. You have benchmarks in your curriculum. So again, it's a way for us to navigate the number of 1,000. It said investigate 1,000. They're going to be adding numbers to 1,000, but they're not getting crazy with this either. So There are lots of things we can do ahead of time to navigate to get to 1,000, make sure they're solid in 100. There's a number of templates in there for just trading money. So instead of doing base 10 blocks right off the bat, use money to trade. 5 pennies is a nickel, 2 nickels is a dime. Not saying don't use base 10 blocks at all. I'm just saying use money to keep it in front of them. But also it gives a reason to you teaching me base 10 blocks. Now I know what the heck this trading stuff is all about. It's tangible. There's money. I can see it. Whereas when you just gave me 10 little white cubes and said they became this yellow rod because you called it a rod, I have no connection with that. But if I know money, I will tell you that that's a loonie and now I've got a $10 bill, or it's a penny and I'm going to make 10 cents, right? However I want to frame that. It makes more sense to start with money than some little cube that I don't really understand yet. So we're going to bring it out. We're just not going to bring it out right off the bat. Okay, the rest of these, this is the information about your link. If you've already are getting close to it, the link for your winter count. There is a lesson in the website as well. So I just want to make sure that you know it's there. You may not be there yet and you may not be there till November, and that's fine. It's just there if you do need it. Okay, so the rest of these you've seen before. I'm not going to work too much about these because they've been in there. And I've also included cycles for you in your, when you're talking about duration of time, months of the year, 13 moons that go along with Indigenous learning. So that's included in here as well, if that's something that you want to bring into one of your conversations. And again, there will be a lesson that'll go around that, but there's also links here that you can use that have great stories on them that you could use that with the students. And this is just a resource site, but I've given you all of these resources already before. So if you want, they're going to be in the slide deck. You can just click them on any one of these. There's your bingo cards with the money, but those are also in session 1. So a lot of this is just a repeat, but more so for the people who might just be new right now. So we're going to deal with Cuisenaire rods and activities in November, how we will bring that in to help with adding and money, and how we're going to do that with unit fractions. So we'll tie all of those pieces together in November. So no rush to worry about all of the pieces that were highlighted in yellow. Is there anybody, I'm going to stop right here, but is there anybody that's left here who has not been to the Moving Forward website or is not sure how to get there? As long as you've all got your logins, that's the main thing. Okay. Okay, you have got your logins, or you would like me to show you where it is? Just unmute yourself, you guys.
I wasn't at the first section, so I'm not sure if I missed that.
Okay, let's go back and pick it up.
Myself as well as Marina.
Okay, Marina, let us. Okay, so this is the website. I'll put it into the chat box. When you signed up for the sessions, you received an email that said, welcome to, and here's your confirmation of registration. And then you also received a second email that said, welcome to the Moving Forward website. Now, if you don't remember that, if you just put that into your search bar at the top of your email, just put in Moving Forward Curriculum, all one word, just Moving Forward Curriculum. It should pop up for you. And that has your password and your login for the website. And if it doesn't come up, just let me know and I will get you one.
Thank you.
Okay. So this is the Moving Forward website, just to make sure that you're on the same page. You are in a cohort group right now, which is the provincial cohort group. So you need a login and password, which you haven't, or we can set up. You're going to go into math. And you're going down into grade 2. And I better log in. So here is the first session that you can access any information that you want from the first session, the recordings, the handouts. I go in, and then tomorrow morning there'll be a new one with today's date on it, and you'll have all of that. So this is, here's the recording that we did for the very first session. Here are all of the handouts that came along with support. Now, are every one of these looked at in the video? No, in some cases, I just gave you some that would support the activities that you were looking to do in the first 2 months. Here's some money and games that you can do. There's your bingo ones that we were talking about. So if you just want the kids to learn the money, that's a good one to go to. First Nations, and then general resources is always things like a template. You saw some templates with numbers and coins on them where they use that for trading. So there's a penny and a nickel and a dime. So they would put a handful of pennies on and count out for every 5, they put it over and trade it for a nickel. For every 2 nickels, trade it for a dime. So they're getting the idea of how to regroup and place value. We'll talk about place value once they know the money. First, they just get the equivalents going. So anything that's a template would be over in this. If it's already here, I won't repeat that in this session. So if we are going to use it again and again, it'll already be there. I'll only put into this folder, for example, in general resources, something that's new. So each time you go into your folder, it will be a new recording, a new list of resources. And so you have access to going back and forth to all of them. There's no rush to download these because they're not going away. They're not timed at the end of the year to disappear. This is just a permanent fixture that's going to be up now. So you'll always can go back in and grab the materials that you need from there. So that